I'm in Kamakura, a city in Japan that featured in a few of Ozu's films, but is also the final resting place of the master director. It's one of the most special places on Earth. It moves at a pace of an Ozu film, and walking around it you can't help but think of the director, his team and his actors and all the incredible work they did from the 1930s all the way up to the early 1960s. Films about people, relationships, family and a country that was changing. It felt like the right place to talk about him, and I'm going to count down my personal favourite 10 films of his. In at number 10, Good Morning. There's a surprising amount of farts in this movie. As so often with his films, this is about traditional Japan in conflict with the new world. But while most Ozu films dealt with it in a serious or emotional way, this was a lighter and certainly funnier film. There are a few plots going on here, but the most charming one involves a group of children who try to pressure their conservative parents into buying a TV set so they can watch the sumo wrestling. The title comes from this scene, where a child criticizes the polite formalities of the parents as being disingenuous. Good Ozu never had any children of his own, but he is one of the masters of showing what children are really like on screen. Innocent, but also kind of naughty, and he does all this in a funny and loving way.
Of course, madam. I love you. Baka ne.
Good Morning is in fact a very loose remake of his 1932 silent film I Was Born But. And throughout his filmography there are brilliant child characters, but this is probably the most iconic one with kids at its core. And it's incredibly memorable due to all the farting. In Ozu's own childhood he was sent to a boarding school, but would often sneak out and go to the cinema, and after seeing the 1916 American anti-war film Civilization, he decided that he wanted to make films himself. And thank God he made that decision, as he is still one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. In at number 9, Early Spring. A marvellous film about a salaryman having an affair to escape his tedious life. The first of many films on this list with a season in its title. In some ways, the use of the seasons in his film's titles was another way to talk about time moving forward and the changes happening within the country. And in this film, we enter the world of the salaryman. Yes, the tough life of a Tokyo salaryman is not an enviable one, and Ozu again has such wonderful empathy for these people. In Early Spring we follow a man working for a brick manufacturing company whose marriage has suffered after the death of their son. Some joy is brought into his life when he begins an affair with a typist at the company, but soon his wife begins to suspect something is amiss. We don't see much of the affair, or indeed the moment the wife first finds out. Ozu often leaves out the big events that other films would focus on. He is more interested in their impact to the characters' lives and interactions with each other. And in this film it also has an added element where you wonder if they are actually carrying out the affair. It's a beautiful film about people struggling. Indeed, he himself struggled before becoming a filmmaker. He failed the economics exam to get into Kobe University, and then failed the exam to get into teaching college. He ended up as a substitute teacher in a school in the mountains, but his love for film never faltered, and he would travel to the city on weekends to watch movies. In at number 8, Early Summer. Well, we're sticking with the early seasons, and here with our first appearance from Hara. This is the second installment of the unofficial, unconnected Noriko trilogy, where Hara plays different characters called Noriko, but they all share the same thing. They are modern women in post-World War II Japan.
飯を食うのもいいが、とにかく終戦後、女がエチケットを悪用して、ますますずうずうしくなってきつつあることだけは確かだね。
そんなことない。これでやっと普通になってきたの。今まで男がずうずうしすぎたのよ。しっかりしっかり。
Early Summer is set in Kamakura, and here Noriko is an unmarried 28-year-old woman who lives with her extended family, who decide it is time for her to find a husband. It is another stunning film, and is a great example of the wonderful partnership Ozu had with Hara. She is exceptional in the film. The year he died, she retired from acting at the age of 42, and then lived a secluded life here in Kamakura, rarely to be seen again, refusing to do interviews or have her photo taken. She died in 2015 at the age of 95. In 2001, Satoshi Kon's excellent anime Millennium Actress was partly inspired by Hara, and in that a man meets up with a retired legendary actress now living a secluded life. It's a beautiful film, and even more moving when you know Hara's work. For my money, she was one of the greatest actresses to ever live. In at number 7, Late Autumn. Now moving on to a late season. 9 years after Early Summer, and now Hara is no longer the daughter, but the mother in a movie, and she is equally wonderful as a nurturing older woman. Yet again, we have a story about an unmarried woman in her 20s who others think should get married, but this time it isn't her family, it's just a group of drunk businessmen. While drinking, they talk about how good the widowed Hara still looks, and decide that it's time for her daughter to marry, and then believe that she will only get married if her mother gets remarried first. It's brilliant to have these gossiping, meddling old men. My favourite character in the film is the daughter's best friend, played superbly by Mariko Okada, who confronts the men about their plot.
なんだ、ここ君の家かい。
そうよ。今のがうちのお母さん。私がここのお嬢さん。
ひどいもんだね。
でもおじちゃま、お勘定は払ってよ。いくら食べてもいいからね。
ああ、払いますよ。払う払う。
ねえ、じゃんじゃんつけてよ。お酒もだよ。
この頃のお嬢さんにはかないませんよ。
It was based on a book by Ton Satomi, an author who also spent most of his life here in Kamakura. And Ozu wrote the script with his frequent screenwriting partner, Kogo Noda. Ozu said of Noda that they got on so well as they were both so alike, and they certainly both enjoyed a drink. Ozu said, "With Noda and me, we see alike about staying up late and drinking and things like that. That is the most important thing." Early in their partnership, they would go to bars and stay up late drinking until the story and the characters would come to them. And later in their partnership, they would write in a house in the mountains and would measure the progress of their scripts by how much sake they had drunk. Their films were so remarkable that they must have drunk one hell of a lot of sake. In at number 6, Floating Weeds. The title is a rather insulting way to refer to a group of actors. This is another remake of an earlier Ozu black and white silent film, and boy oh boy is this a stunningly beautiful colour film. For my money, this is his best looking movie. It is simply gorgeous. We follow a travelling theatre troupe who arrive in a small seaside town. The leader of their troupe is a wonderfully vain, manipulative man. His younger actress girlfriend begins to become jealous when he visits a former mistress and his now grown-up son with her, who thinks he is actually his uncle. We follow the other actors' relationships within the town as their play fails to attract audiences. It's a beautiful film, both visually and tonally. Speaking of the beauty of his films, this is his only film with one of the greatest cinematographers of all time, Kazuo Miyagawa, a truly outstanding cameraman who worked many times with my other two favourite Japanese directors of this period, Kurosawa and Mizoguchi. The colour cinematography in Floating Weeds, though, is some of his very best work. But most Ozu films are stunning, with a totally unique style. Cameras that face the actors directly, making it feel like they're addressing you. He invented the tatami shot, where the camera is placed low, sort of at the level of someone kneeling on a mat. And over his career, he moved his camera less and less, creating beautiful static shots, often with frames within frames. The care gone into every single shot is quite extraordinary. Ozu was a master filmmaker on every single level. In at number 5, Tokyo Twilight.
Ozu's darkest film is a real tearjerker.
This is a deeply bleak and upsetting film and doesn't get enough recognition. We follow two sisters who live at home with their father. Hara yet again plays a mother, but one who has run away from a loveless marriage. And Eneko Irami plays her younger sister, who decides to have an abortion after realizing her boyfriend doesn't care for her. I told you it was bleak. Well, the fun doesn't stop there when both sisters bump into their mother, who abandoned them as children. And throughout all of this, there is this wonderful juxtaposition with upbeat music. It gets darker and darker, and by the end, the characters accept that tragedy is an inevitable part of life. It is certainly a hard film to not cry during. Ozu certainly would have seen his fair share of nightmares during World War II. He had been conscripted twice into the Japanese army. The first time in 1937, and he ended up taking part in campaigns such as the Battle of Nanchang. Upon returning to Japan, he made the excellent Brothers and Sisters of the Toda Family and There Was a Father, before being conscripted again in 1943, this time with the duty to make propaganda films. He was posted in Singapore, but spent most of his time relaxing and watching American films, and one in particular stood out to him, Orson Welles' masterpiece, Citizen Kane. With all his reading, tennis playing, rug collecting and movie watching, he failed to finish his propaganda film, and in 1945, at the end of the war, destroyed the script and all the footage. He and his film team were detained by the Allies. The first boat back to Singapore only had space for 28 of the 32-man team. A lottery was held and Ozu won a place, but gave it up to someone who was more desperate to return home. In at number 4, The Only Son.
Another film that doesn't hide away from the hard struggles of life.
This is the oldest film on my list. Released in 1936, this was Ozu's first sound picture, and straight out of the gate, it had wonderful, simple yet realistic dialogue. Ozu's first talkie tells a very human tale about a mother and son. The film begins with the son asking his mother if he can leave the small town and get his education in Tokyo, where his teacher is moving to. Even though she can't really afford it, she agrees. We cut forward 13 years. She has worked the entire time in a silk factory and has sold her house. She visits her son in Tokyo to find that he is living in poverty, having failed to make it in the big city. Even his teacher is now running a struggling tonkatsu restaurant in an industrial area. It is a tragic film, but a truthful one, about family, love, sacrifice, and about the people who are often forgotten about in fiction, the people who gamble and lose. This was the breakthrough role for another of Ozu's regular actors, Shishu Ryu, who had appeared in many of Ozu's silent films, but after this film began to work with other big-name directors. He was only 32 in The Only Son, but played a much older man, something he would do for the director many times. Ozu made 54 films, and astonishingly, Ryu appeared in 52 of them. In 1985, Wim Wenders tracked him down for his documentary Tokyo Ga, and when Wenders complimented his ability to play old, he gave it all to Ozu.
Ozu always told him how to do something, and then he carried out his orders without giving it a second thought. Anyway, acting under Ozu was much less a matter of bringing discoveries and experiences to a role as of precisely carrying out Ozu's instructions.
But now we're moving from the 1930s to the 1960s, with a film where I feel Ryo gave his finest performance. In at number 3, An Autumn Afternoon. Ozu's last film showed that he still had so much to give. Here Ryu plays a businessman and a father who's starting to realise that maybe he should let his daughter marry and move away from home. Yes, it's one of these again. But we get a remarkable picture of his whole family. We see his eldest son and his daughter-in-law and how materialistic and modern they are in comparison. But this is a film about loneliness and deals with that hard subject in a beautiful way. Ryu is shown as a man with a drinking problem, and it is subtly shown that it will only get worse when he's alone. He repeatedly goes to a bar where the barmaid reminds him of his dead wife. And in this bar, we get scenes which is the closest to Ozu talking about the war. It is a stunning-looking, melancholic film, and adding to its resonance is the fact that this was Ozu's last. In this, he states that loneliness comes for us all, and again that we need to accept that. It is a perfect last film for the master director. It builds on all his previous themes, modern times clashing with old values, family, love and duty. It is a heartbreaking film and ends with a man alone, with a beautiful final shot for one of the greatest directors of all time. In at number 2, Late Spring. I'm at the train station that features at the beginning of that masterpiece. This is the first time Ozu worked with Hara, and her chemistry with Ryu playing her widowed father is something else. This is the best of Ozu's films that deal with children who are currently at home and have to move on. This one's particularly moving as neither one of them wants it to happen. It seems at 27 she is destined to not marry and spend the rest of her life looking after him. But one day he states that he is going to remarry, and she suddenly doesn't know where she belongs. It's a stunningly touching picture with 2 incredibly powerful central performances. Again, it deals with changing attitudes in Japan. It's a film about family, duty, belonging, and letting the ones you love go. The revelation at the end is one of the all-time great film endings. Ozu had trouble getting his script through American censorship that was going on during the American occupation at the time. The film deals with arranged marriages, which did not sit well with the censors. There were many issues the censors had with the script, and they weren't allowed to refer to Tokyo as being in ruins, so simply called it dusty in comparison to Kyoto, which was putting it mildly. Ozu dealt with all of this in his usual subtle way, most famously in the bike riding scene. No reference is ever made to the American occupation, but there is a Coca-Cola sign prominently displayed near a bridge with a sign saying its weight capacity is 30 tons. That's meaningless to the 2 of them on a bike, but would be important for the American military vehicles. So much of Late Spring is about old Japan in conflict with new ideas in this changing world. Kamakura and Kyoto are perfect places to show the beauty of old Japan, and the film is filled with Ozu's famous pillow shots, shots of objects or places seemingly unrelated to what's going on in between scenes. The most famous one being the vase, which has been dissected by so many film scholars, and all of them come up with their own feeling about its significance. For me, it's still about old Japan, and Noriko realizing that she has to move on and there's nothing she can do about it. Maybe I'm wrong though. What do you think the vase is about?
どうしたんだい？
私、
うん？
このままお父さんといたい。どこにも行きたくないの。お父さんとこうして一緒にいるだけでいいの。それだけで私楽しいの。 お嫁に行ったってこれ以上の楽しさはないと思う。このままでいいの。
だけどお前そんなこと言ったって。
いいえいいの。お父さん奥さんおもらいになったっていいのよ。やっぱり私お父さんのそばにいたいの。お父さんが好きなの。お父さんとこうしていることが私には一番幸せなの。ねえお父さん、お願い。このままにさせといて。お嫁に行ったってこれ以上の幸せがあるとは私は思えない。
This is one of the greatest Japanese films of all time, and is my favourite Japanese film of the 1940s. And the last film on this list is my favourite Japanese film of the 1950s. But maybe Kamakura isn't the right place to talk about it. And in at number 1, Tokyo Story. It's kind of silly to rank these films, but it was just a way to talk about a few of them that I love, and this is the one that comes up in my mind more than any of the others. Maybe because it was the first one I saw and started my love for the director, and there are scenes in this that I think about on a weekly basis. We follow an elderly couple who go to visit their children in Tokyo. Their daughter runs a hair salon and doesn't have time to show her parents around or be with them. Their eldest son is a physician who also doesn't have any time to spare for them. The only person who does is their widowed daughter-in-law, played by Hara. Their son, her husband, went missing in the Pacific Theatre, and she takes time away from her busy office job to entertain and show the parents around Tokyo. Eventually their children send them off to a beachside town, but the old couple find it hard to sleep with the noise at night. They decide to go to Osaka to visit another child, and then tragedy strikes. In typical Ozu fashion, it isn't shown on screen. He goes out of his way to avoid melodrama, and for me, it makes it even more powerful. He doesn't try to manipulate the audience. He shows things as they are and holds up a mirror to life, warts and all, which makes it all so much more impactful. One of the greatest scenes in film history comes when the old couple's youngest daughter talks to Hara. This scene and Hara's delivery has a special place in my mind.
でも子供って大きくなるとだんだん親から離れていくもんじゃないかしら。お姉様ぐらいになるともうお父様やお母様とは別のお姉様だけの生活っていうものがあるのよ。お姉様だって決して悪気であんなことなすったんじゃないと思うの。誰だってみんな自分の生活が一番大事になってくるのよ。そうかしら。でも私そんな風になりたくない。それじゃ親子なんて随分つまらない。そうね。でもみんなそうなってくんじゃないかしら。だんだんそうなるのよ。じゃあお姉さんも？ええ。なりたかないけどやっぱりそうなっていくわよ。いやね、世の中ってそう嫌なことばっかり。
It's a terrible fact that life is disappointing, and we have to embrace the joys in life. And one of the great joys is cinema and the films of Ozu. His films have given me so much joy over the years. They're uniquely Japanese, but deal with universal themes: family, love and loss, and what it means to be alive. 10 years after Tokyo Story was released, Ozu died on his birthday in 1963. He was only 60 years old. A real loss to the world of cinema. He was never married and never had a family of his own, which is astonishing considering just how well he could portray families on screen. He was clearly a man with endless empathy. He is buried here in Kamakura, only a short walk from the station from the opening of Late Spring. He shares this grave with his mother. There are no names. It simply reads nothingness. And so my time in Kamakura ends, and as I watch the sun set, with the island of Enoshima and Mount Fuji in the distance, I think about the films of Ozu and how they will always remain with me, and with anyone else who has seen them. A great gift to the world. Well, those are my favourite Ozu films. What have I missed out? And what are your favourite Japanese directors? And if you like this video, don't forget to share, subscribe and all that jazz. Anyway, bye.